There we, well, maybe. Oh, there we go. Okay, that worked. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. Looks like we have 3 people on, some names that we recognize from last time. So my name is Todd Welter. I'm going to leave you with Tony, who is going to take charge of this webinar and take you through it and the others that are upcoming. Did you put on the record? Yes. Okay, good. So we're recording this, and these slides will be available on our website for you. It's better to do it that way. It's better and easier for you guys to do it that way, like we did last time. So welcome to this year's webinars, like we did a few years back. Today we're going to talk, or Tony's going to talk about cost analysis, looking at costs and rate setting and stuff like that, and this one being about determination of cost. So this is going to be a review to most of you, and if not all of you. Please ask questions. Feel free to send us an email with any questions, and we can maybe bring them up into the next webinar, which is all set up for Mondays at noon. Today, next Monday the 12th, and the one following that on the 19th. And then again, it'll be the same kind of gig. Tony L. Holmes here will take care of you. So with no further ado, and also that text box. By the way, if just like other things we've done for the CDPHE, we're first of all thrilled to death to do this again and see you guys. And secondly, if there's a question, we may do a little research and get back to you, but we want to make sure that we post it, because very often, as you all know, if you have a question, somebody else has exactly the same question. So we'll make sure that to post it that way. So I will step out of the way and let Tony.
I do have a question.
Thanks. So thanks everyone for joining us today. I really appreciate you spending the lunch hour with me. As Todd said, today is all about costs and really breaking down each cost category into the most granular basic terms. Each of our webinars are going to be Mondays from 12 to 1, so we'll have 2 other webinars, and as Todd said, the recordings will all be located on our rtwelter.com/public-health page. So cost analysis. Performing a cost analysis is a Title X requirement. So we're not picking on you guys or singling you out. This is a Title X requirement, and essentially the goal is to demonstrate how your sliding fee scales are determined and developed. The Department of Health and Human Services, OPA, states that charges must be based on a cost analysis of all services provided by the project. So family planning programs are offering services in an era that is escalating costs, shrinking federal and state support, and increased competition. So to survive, it's really important that family planning programs implement strong business practices, and this includes collection and analysis of financial information that will provide insight to the real and complete cost of doing business. Only agencies with a sound financial management plan and a complete knowledge of the cost of doing business will remain financially viable, and this becomes increasingly important as the United States continues to implement healthcare reform. So your cost analysis or cost setting method is going to allow you to understand on a very basic level the costs associated with your services. It will also allow you to make informed decisions about setting appropriate fees for your services, as well as negotiation and rates with payers. And then the overall goal of sustainability of your family planning Title X program. We all want to stay around and be viable for many years to come. So what is cost? Each program must be able to identify agency expenses that are related to the provision of family planning services. Some programs are 100% family planning, and this is straightforward. So if you only do family planning, consider yourself very lucky because this process will be incredibly simple. Other programs are part of a larger agency with family planning as only one of several programs. This will mean that some of the program expenses are allocated to family planning, while other expenses are either shared with other programs or connected to other programs. And so you must be able to determine a method for appropriately allocating expenses to family planning. How do you define costs? Your organization should have access to financial statements or reports on a monthly basis. This is usually called the P&L, a profit and loss statement, which is essentially a historic look at the business or your agency and what has happened in the past. Cost is everything related to Title 10 services. So again, we're only looking at Title 10, and this can be things like rent, personnel, whether that's full-time, part-time, subcontractors, insurance, supplies, lab, medications, any in-kind contributions, any and all things that are related to running the Family Planning Title 10 program. Many of these provide other services in addition to Title 10, so it's imperative that we keep track of all expenses and the programs that those expenses are allocated to. It may be necessary to make estimates when documenting your expenses, so make sure if you are using any estimation, you are documenting the rationale for separating out those expenses. So it's perfectly acceptable to use estimates. You don't have to be exact, but just make sure that you're documenting how you came up with those estimates. Direct costs are expenses associated with providing a service. So these can be things like personnel costs, any materials or supplies used, travel, consulting services, equipment, mail, again, anything associated with providing a service line. And then indirect costs are expenses incurred to support direct care that are incurred for common objectives but cannot be specifically identified with a particular program or activity. So these are things that are shared across the organization for multiple programs or service lines. Things like administrative staff, housekeeping, rent, and then we have in-kind contributions. So in-kind contributions are goods or services that are provided at no cost to the family planning program to further the goals and outcomes of the program. The program should allocate any individuals that volunteer in your program or are donated by some other agency. Remember, this represents part of the cost of providing services. If you did not have these volunteers or in-time staff, you would have to pay for those. So be sure to include fringe benefits as part of the fair market value for these individuals, and also allocate any other in-kind contributions, such as admin, facilities, equipment, or supplies. Now we're going to talk about common costs and cost categories. Again, we're looking to identify on the most granular level any and all expenses related to family planning. So here are the most common cost categories that are going to be applicable to your setting: operating expenses, professional services, personnel costs, provider-specific costs, ancillary services, things like lab, radiology, pharmacy, community outreach and education, administrative, and then anything that does not fit into a cost category Those are going to be defined as other costs. Operating expenses. This will more than likely be your largest cost category, as it entails a lot of different expenses. Things like advertising. So this may be classified as both marketing or community outreach and education. It's totally up to you how you want to set the parameters on these cost categories. Education, training, this can include any kind of publications or journals that you're bringing back to your organization, conferences, resources, handouts, videos, professional dues or professional subscriptions, computer and technology. This could also include your EMR or practice management system, billing, equipment leases, office liability insurance, postage, delivery, shipping, supplies. Again, these are just to give you a good idea of some of the most common expenses that are associated with this operating expenses cost category. You're more than welcome to figure out which ones are most applicable to you and your setting. Telephone, answering service, utilities, which could include things like gas and electricity, rent, internet, housekeeping, waste management, any kind of professional liability or business insurance. Professional services is also going to be one of your cost categories. These are going to entail things like accounting, finance, bookkeeping, billing, audit, any kind of legal services, consulting services, recruiting. Personnel costs. So these are any and all staff associated with a family planning program. And this will include management and non-management, exempt and non-exempt employees. One thing to keep in mind for personnel costs, we do not want to count our providers in the personnel cost category. Providers are considered revenue producers. So their cost is actually going to be in a separate designated category for providers. We'll take them out of this equation. This is strictly going to be staff. And these are all costs associated with each staff member, which may include wages, benefits, health insurance, retirement, any kind of medical reimbursement, workers' comp, continuing education. The thing with allocation of staff is, again, you have to really go staff member by staff member. So the first task is to identify the staff that spends any amount of time during the year functioning in the family planning program. Because staff may work at different tasks while they are in the family planning program, you may want to identify how much time they spend in different functions. To do this, you should allocate every person who has worked during the reporting period into one or more cost categories. So for example, a nurse practitioner may not be providing medical functions at all times. So she or he may also provide support for the lab, for the pharmacy, for any kind of counseling services you offer, or as an administrator at different times. Therefore, she or he should be allocated into those cost categories rather than 100% of his or her time allocated in the medical cost category. So again, the devil is in the details. It's really important to be as granular as possible when you're allocating salaries and wages and shared employees or shared providers across multiple programs. Identify all individuals who spend any amount of time during the year on family planning related services, and then you'll want to determine the tasks each staff member performs throughout the year using the previously mentioned common cost methodology. Common personnel costs, again, wages, benefits. This could also include accrual, workers' comp, continuing education. Again, any and all expenses related to personnel. Here is a great time study example. So time study is essentially determining the full-time employee percentage, identifying time span to measure. So are we looking at daily, monthly, weekly? And then you'll want to take each employee or each staff member and delineate tasks performed by that individual. So for example, we have an employee that's a full-time employee and they spend 30% of their time on WIC, 40% of their time on family planning, 20% of their time on immunization, and 10% on other activities. So that equals a full-time employee, but we can only count 40% of the full-time employee's salary towards the family planning costs. So we're taking this employee and we're counting only 40% of their salary towards the cost of family planning expenses, since they're a shared employee across multiple programs. Provider-specific costs. So back to what I stated about not counting providers in the personnel cost category. They will be in their own category, and you'll want to delineate all specific provider costs. So wages, bonuses, any kind of benefits, bill accrual, if they have any dry cleaning or laundry benefits, vehicle expenses.
Right now, and I'm having trouble accessing it.
If you guys could mute your line, that would be great, since this is a recorded presentation. We want to make sure that everybody's muted. Thank you so much. Supplies, again, very specific to the provider. Cell phone, any kind of CME, which includes travel, insurance, which includes malpractice, health, life, dental, professional licensure or certification, payroll tax, business advancement, 401k, lab coat, any and all expenses related to provider. You'll want to count in this particular category. The allocation of personnel and other expenses may be done in a variety of ways. However, the methodology must accurately distribute expenses into each category. In some instances, estimates may be all that are available. So if you're using an estimation, as we discussed before, just make sure that you're recording the methodology. The more precise you are, the better the outcome. Ancillary services. So these are things like lab, radiology, pharmacy, and pharmacy will include medication or devices, any kind of medication administration fees, in-house or contract pharmacists, whichever is applicable to your setting, and 340B program management. Community outreach and education. So these will be things like events, if you're renting an exhibit booth or going to a health fair, any kind of conferences where you're doing community outreach and education about the services that you offer. Travel costs, marketing, collateral materials, any supplies that are specific to community outreach and education. In-kind contributions. Again, anytime you're doing any categorizing for in-kind contributions, you must use the fair market value. So you'll want to count your volunteer time for events like flu shot clinics, any donated staff that you have been provided, goods or materials donated to the program, So these could be medical expenses or educational materials. Maybe someone has been so generous to provide space, anything that has been donated to the family planning program that would otherwise be a cost if they had not been donated. Lab services provided at no cost by the state or other lab. So any labs that are done with Title X that are done at no cost. And then pharmaceuticals donated by manufacturers. Other costs can include indirect or uncategorized costs, depreciation, so any depreciable items within your organization that are used for family planning. So things like furniture, computers, printers, anything that will have a depreciation over time. The program must also allocate other expenses to the family planning program. The allocation must be done consistently to capture the real costs that occur in each cost category. Several options for making these allocations include using the program's percentage of total budget for family planning, percentage of patients, visits, or encounters that are exclusive to family planning, percentage of full-time employees in family planning compared to all full-time employees. Regardless, the methodology must accurately represent expenses in each cost category. You should document your methods and have explanations for any differences. So how do we determine costs? As we discussed with our cost categories, really the first step is identifying everything that's considered an expense to family planning. You'll want to use your most recent fiscal data available. This can be fiscal or calendar year data, but it will need to be 12 consecutive months of fiscal data. Your agency must be able to identify expenses related to family planning services. Expenses related to any and all other programs or services may not be counted in determining your Title X costs. So again, we have to be very specific and methodical with identifying all of our expenses and have a documented rationale for how we came up with those expenses, or if we're using any estimations, what we used for our estimate. So be as granular as possible. Again, think of any and all expenses related to family planning services, any and everything. It's very similar to when you sit down to do your taxes and you have to think about every single thing that's deductible, all of your deductions. You want to make sure that you're treating this process as specifically and as delicately as possible and be able to explain your logic for any expenses that you're reporting. So I'd like to take a look at a sample cost analysis that we have on file from an agency that reported several years ago, just to give you a real world example and look at how these cost analysis look. I'm sure that what we're talking about in today's webinar may seem overwhelming, but it's actually very, very simple. I think that we may be making it even more complicated just because we're trying to simplify it. So hopefully this will make you feel much more prepared when you're approaching the cost analysis. And keep in mind, each agency will be different. No one cost analysis is going to look the same or identical based on a variety of factors. But each agency has different number of providers, locations, types of services, budget categories. Again, there's not going to be an agency that has the same exact cost as another agency. The key is to be as detailed and consistent as possible. I want to remind you guys that if you do have multiple locations, you must account for all family planning expenses for each and every location. You'll bear with me for just a moment. I'm going to pull up the sample cost analysis to make sure you get it. So here is a sample cost analysis. And we're looking at data from 2014. So our first category is going to be second quarter 2014. We're looking at revenue by providers, and we're looking at the example of 2 full-time family planning providers. So if you have providers that support other services or other programs, you will not be able to use this distribution. So for our revenue by provider, it looks like provider 1 brought in $14,590, and provider 2 brought in $20,160, again, specific to family planning. And you can see the financial data for each quarter. So that's our income, our total quarterly income by provider. Then we go down to our operating expenses cost category, and you can see all of our expenses. So we've got advertising expenses of $250 in April, $250 in June. We have computer support expenses in June of $100, copier expenses each month, janitorial expenses, postage and delivery. We have our professional fees, which include billing services. This number seems to be variable based on the month. We have our lease locations. So again, we want to account for each and every location. And we have our expenses for each supply. We have our telephone expenses. And as you can see, with our cost categories, our providers have a 50-50 distribution split. So they're essentially splitting the expenses right down the middle, because in this particular example, the providers are 100% devoted to family planning. So our total operating expenses for the quarter are going to be $1,802.50 per provider. Then we're going to go down to our health insurance, medical reimbursement, and our staff expenses. So we have our insurance for our staff. It looks like it's a $1,200 a month premium. So again, that cost is shared by provider evenly. We have our staff wages of a receptionist full-time, again, exclusive to family planning. And it looks like the receptionist is at $17.50 an hour. So we've got our April, March, May, and June, which is evenly split by provider. And then we have our MA, again, even split. So then we have our quarter total for staff wages and benefits, again, shared by provider. And then we go down to our chargeable expenses. This is where we account for our 2 nurse practitioners and their expenses. So it looks like we have professional liability insurance, and this is, again, all going to be specific to the provider costs and the providers that are rendering services for the family planning program. So we've got $934 in April, $1,761 in June. Again, 50-50 split. have our 2 nurse practitioners at $85,000 annually, and we've got our salary split. And then if you look at our total chargeable expenses, that's everything chargeable as well as operating expenses, our staff wages, everything that we reviewed above. And you'll notice that our total income minus expenses puts us at a negative for the quarter, substantial negative. So we want to make sure that when we're coming up with all of our costs, we're using that to determine our sliding fee scale and how much we should charge, again, based on the data of our total costs for family planning. So that gives you a realistic view of what this is going to look like when you start the cost analysis process, hopefully very soon. So be as detailed and consistent as possible. I do see a question that has come up. Can you explain provider? We are a local public health agency with staff that provides the services. We do not have an external provider. Yeah, that's a great question. So if you do not have a provider, you will not be using the provider-specific category. More than likely, you will be using the staff category, the personnel category for all of your services. It looks like this question came from Georgia, so if you'd like to talk more about that when you actually get into your cost analysis, cost setting process, be happy to do so. So how do you start? What do you do to conduct a cost analysis? First and foremost, you're going to allocate all expenses to the appropriate cost categories. And you want to make sure that these are associated with family planning only services. So collect your cost data and allocate costs to family planning. Collect relative values for services family planning provides. Collect utilization data on all family planning services. And then determine cost of each service and established fees based on this information. So today we're talking about how to collect that data. How do we allocate each cost to a category? How do I identify family planning specific costs? In our next webinar, we will be talking about how to establish relative values for your services as well as your utilization data. And then in our last webinar, we'll really delve into how to put all of this together to determine a cost for each service, and again, help develop that fee schedule based on the cost information. While you're conducting your cost analysis or your cost setting activity, it is imperative that you record your cost setting methodology. So a uniform template will be distributed, and you will need to be able to answer these questions based on how you conducted your cost analysis. So how did you carry out the cost analysis process? Did you utilize a third party? And if you did, which third party? Was this performed internally by your organization's accounting department, your bookkeeper? Was this analysis performed internally by family planning staff? Or if none of these options apply, you'll want to be able to describe exactly how you conducted your cost analysis. What period is your organization's fiscal year? Do you utilize a calendar year from January to December, or do you use a fiscal year from June to May? Or what exactly fiscal year do you use within your organization for financial reporting? On which reporting period did you base your cost analysis? So again, are we utilizing a calendar year, a fiscal year, or both? Maybe your fiscal year is the same as your calendar year. Again, just be able to answer these questions. You'll also want to provide supporting documentation of itemized expenses that you're including in your cost analysis and the annual cost for each item. And then you'll need to be able to describe how you determined the value of family planning services. Did you utilize Medicare's fee schedule? Did you utilize RBRVS? Or did you utilize some other method? Regardless, you'll need to be able to explain how you determined the value. You'll also need to be able to supply a list of CPT codes and determine the annual volume for each. So for many of you that are on electronic health records or practice management systems, there should be very easily accessible reporting that can provide this information. You'll also need to provide supporting documentation for your most recently approved sliding fee scale. Maybe you haven't had your sliding fee scale approved since we did this the last time. Regardless, we'll need to be able to see your most recently approved fee schedule. If your organization did not conduct your cost analysis according to the methods that will be reviewed in our 3-part webinar series, you'll need to be able to provide a summary description of the method that you used. The great thing about this process is that you are flexible in the method that you use for your cost setting. As long as you can explain it and provide supporting documentation, you have complete flexibility. You'll also want to provide any comments on the cost analysis process for your organization and the manner in which your family planning program collected this information. So again, just make sure that you're recording any methodology behind your cost setting. Some helpful reminders. You may use any form of cost setting that is appropriate for your setting, as long as it can demonstrate how fees are determined on the sliding fee scale. Again, this is amazing, complete flexibility on the form of cost setting you're allowed to use. If your organization has recently updated its cost setting activity, it must have been done within the last 12 months. So we're saying the cutoff for that is April of 2017. So if you've done your cost setting activity and it has been done within the last 12 months, you may use that. CDPHE is here to help you. Jody Camp, I'm not sure if she's on the line or not, but she has instructed that if you guys have any questions related to cost setting, please reach out to her. I've listed her contact information in the slide, jody.camp@state.co.us. Her phone number is also listed, so please utilize your resources. She's more than happy to help you guys navigate through cost setting. And then our timeline. So for March, we will be doing these 3 one-hour web-based trainings on cost setting. So today was our first one. We'll be meeting every Monday for the next 2 weeks from 12 to 1 to discuss how to conduct a cost analysis. The cost setting template will be distributed. So the sample cost analysis that we reviewed in previous slides will be distributed to you. You are not required to use this template. You may use any form of cost setting that is appropriate for your setting. The cost setting summary uniform template will also be distributed this month. And that template is going to be almost identical to the recording your methodology slides that we just reviewed so that you're prepared and you know what's expected as far as supporting documentation. April. So in April, I would expect that you guys will be in the thick of cost setting, cost analysis process. You also have the option anytime between now and May 1st to contact RT Welter for technical assistance. We are contracted to provide 30-minute phone consultations and coaching sessions regarding how to perform or conduct your cost analysis, cost setting activity for your organization. So you have us, we're more than happy to help you troubleshoot or talk through any questions that come up with cost setting. You also have CDPHE. So I highly encourage you to utilize your resources. If you are ahead of the game and like to be on top of stuff, you can submit your cost reporting to CDPHE in the month of April. For technical assistance, you're more than welcome to contact us. It'll be both myself and Todd Welter, who was on the call earlier. You may contact us via email, or our office line has also been posted here. I will caution that you may receive a quicker response if you contact us via email. But again, please utilize your resources. That's what we're here for. One reminder, RT Welter unfortunately cannot conduct your cost analysis. You do have to do the cost analysis yourself, but we are here as a resource to make this as simple of a process as possible. May. So your cost analysis is due to CDPHE by May 1st. So please put that in your calendar. May 1st, it must be submitted to CDPHE. RT Welter will be reviewing cost analysis for each and every organization and will be providing necessary feedback. So if yours is perfect and you hear nothing from us, then great. If we have questions or maybe we need some additional information to really understand your cost analysis, we may be contacting you to ask questions or get additional information. All cost setting activities and updated sliding fee scales must be completed. So May 1st is not very far away. I would encourage you to take this information and really figure out a plan for how to get this done by the required submission date. What's next? So in our next two webinars, we'll be covering in webinar 2, volume and value. So this will really drill into how to determine the value of everything you do. So determining the value of all the services that you provide. You'll be multiplying the value by the volume, and then also applying the Medicare fee schedule or RVRVF or any other method that you choose. But we will be covering how to apply the Medicare fee schedule and how to apply the RVRVF methodology in webinar 2. Webinar 3 is where we will put together everything that we've learned in webinar 1 and webinar 2 and utilize that information to develop your fee schedule as well as learn to negotiate with health plans. So we have a lot to cover in the next 2 webinars. I hope that webinar 1 was helpful and gives you a good foundation for where to start. At this time, I'd be happy to take any additional questions or comments or anything you guys would like to discuss related to cost setting, cost analysis. Just a reminder while I'm waiting for questions, you will need the password to log into the next 2 webinars. The password will be the same. It's all caps CDPHECA, and you will need that again for the next 2 webinars. All right, it looks like Liz Stark. Hi, Liz. Can we get the volume reports from CDPHE eye care reports? That's a great question. I do not have the answer to that question. That sounds like that may be a Jody Kemp question.
This is Jody. I apologize for being on. Can you hear me?
Hi, Jody.
Hi. So sorry. Volume reports from iCare can be found through the reporting mechanism when you log in. If you need some help with that, just email me and I can give you the directions to get volume report. Thank you.
Do you have any other questions? Well, if you guys think of anything, just like I said, please let us know. Please reach out to us. You can reach out to Jody Camp as well. We're here to ensure that you guys are successful, and this is not as complicated of a process as it may seem. Our recorded session.
Can you guys please repeat the PIN or the password that we're going to need for the next webinar?
Yes, absolutely. It's CDPHE, CA for cost analysis, and it's all one word, all caps.
Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, well, if there aren't any other questions, I look forward to seeing you guys next week, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. These recorded webinars will be published on the rtwelter.com website /public health. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate your time and your attention today. The slides will be posted as a webinar recorded version, but we're happy to provide copies of the slides as well, Catherine.